Welcome back to another episode of Single Payer Radio. Single Payer Radio is a project of Kentuckians for Single Payer Healthcare. We are an affiliate of the Kentucky chapter of Physicians for a National Health Program, and we're proud to be a member, a community partner with Forward Radio, WFMP 1065, forwardradio.org. We're recording today's show December the 2nd, 2020. The views and opinions expressed here on Single Payer Radio are those of the speakers and not the stations. On a sad note, condolences to the family and friends of Christine Perlin Gump. Chris was a solid force with our group, helping to plan and organize events, make phone calls, stuff envelopes, pass out flyers. Whatever was needed, Chris stepped up. On a personal note, I first met Chris as I was being arrested during a peaceful protest of a George W. Bush visit downtown. The police were out of control. Imagine that. Chris came up to me and said something to the effect, "I saw what happened. Here's my number if you need a witness." Chris saw something. She did something. She was no stranger to good trouble. Mike, what's on the agenda?
Today's topic will be oversight and regulation of research in the U.S. Let me begin by making the usual disclaimer that any comments that I make today represent my personal views and do not represent the Department of Surgery or the University of Louisville.
Any comments that I make are my personal view and do not represent the University of Louisville, Department of Surgery, or Taylor Regional Hospital in Campbellsville, Kentucky.
Well, and our guest speaker today is Laura Clark. Laura is a professor in the Department of Anesthesia at the University of Louisville. She's director of the Acute Pain and Regional Anesthesia. And today she's here as the chairperson of the University of Louisville Biomedical Institutional Review Board. Laura, we appreciate your willingness to spend some time with us and discuss these issues. It's interesting. I can't remember whether it was 6 months or 9 months ago that I made the first contact with you about doing this. But who knew that we would be doing this at a time when all of these issues of emergency use authorization and phase 3 studies would be boiling up with all of these vaccines. So the timing couldn't be better. And what we've done in the past, Laura, was generally give our guest an opportunity to make whatever initial statements they want about the topic, and then the conversation will begin. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mike. I too would need to make that same disclosure that these views are my own. I don't represent the University of Louisville in this program or my anesthesia program as well. So that being said, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Research is a very important part of medicine and the delivery of healthcare. So I think it's really apropos to talk about this. And now that some of the research words are coming out into the mainstream of the news, I couldn't think of a better time to try to simplify some things if I can. I'm very happy to help with this. I've been with the IRB at the university for almost, 18, 20 years. It's hard to remember. But I've also served on a central IRB until just this past month. But the IRBs themselves began in 1974 when the National Research Act was signed into law by the National Commission with the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. So that is a lot of words, but it's primarily to offset the problems that we had in our history of research. And, it can go back even further as to the abhorrent examples of the Nazis when they used their prisoners for all kinds of research that was just unbelievable. But it also was unbelievable that even in this country, and even in this century, not that long ago, we were letting syphilis, people with syphilis, thinking they were being treated when part of them were being treated and some were not, and they didn't know that. And so they let syphilis go on. And so all these things came to light and more, which I won't go into. But that led to that there needed to be some protection of human subjects in research. And so the primary function of the IRB is to safeguard human subjects by looking at research and research ethics and best practices and reviewing research protocols primarily for the single goal of that anyone that is proposed to become a research subject or enter a study would know exactly to the best of the ability that we can of what they're getting into and what they're agreeing to. Over the years, that has kind of morphed into almost something that is problematic in that it is so long. In some of the cancer studies, they can be 30, 35 pages long by putting side effects and that type of thing. But the primary goals are still that people are being told, they are educated more about the study that they're going into, the drugs that they're taking, what are the side effects of those drugs, how long they're going to be in there. So the IRB doesn't really function as a scientific review. That is done on another level. But what we're trying to do is look at the consent that they're presented to when they're looking at doing a study, that this consent is really telling them in language that they can understand or help to understand with the investigator that they know what this study is about. So they're going to also review, we're also going to look at the protocol. We also review that these investigators are using best practices and research ethics. And we always try to balance the research risk to the human subjects with the benefits to society as well as themselves. So with that being said, I'm open to any questions that you might have. And that's about where I'll stop at this point for questions.
All right, that's great. Let me make a quick comment about research in this country in general. We've done what Jane marked, 11, 12 programs on an assortment of health issues in this country. And most of it is not pretty. We're the for-profit health insurance companies, the pharmaceutical industry, the situation of rural health. But one aspect of health in this country that at least in my opinion has been done very well is the way we regulate and oversee how research is carried out. So, and as you just mentioned, Laura, basically the IRB is an oversight board. That's a fair statement, huh?
Yeah, I'd say that's a very good statement.
Okay. What is the situation of this oversight board within the power structure of the university? If I was the chairman or a chairman of a department, surgery or pediatrics, didn't like the way the research protocols were coming through, do they have any ability to come in and tell the IRB that they should be doing this more quickly or in a different way? So what's the reporting structure? Where does the IRB go in terms of the report to the Vice President of Health Affairs or the Vice President of Research or the President of the university? Who's the next step up the ladder, and how far up does it go?
Well, we have a executive vice president for research at the university that we would go to. But just like anything else, when the government is involved, this has blossomed and exponentially into all kinds of regulations. So there's regulations for the investigator. There's regulations for a special FDA regulated drug, or if they're looking at a device, say a pacemaker or any kind of medical device. So with all these regulations, as well as this function of really safeguarding human subjects, we look at several aspects, and a study is presented to us. And part of those regulations are that human research subjects cannot enter a study unless it is approved by an institutional review board, an IRB, so that it has been looked at. And maybe I should say the IRB consists of at least 5 members of varying backgrounds. They have professional experience, some being appropriate scientific, medical people, other ethical people. And we also have at least one member, and often more than that, whose primary concerns are non-scientific. We call them the community members. So that when we look at these research studies, that we look at it from very different perspectives and different aspects. You might be interested to know that it's supposed to be that the consent form is in 8th grade language. And sometimes that's difficult to do with highly scientific studies. But we'll look at the oversight of the research itself, not as a totally scientific review, because that's usually already done, but look at it to make sure that the investigator has looked at all the safeguards for human subjects, and that they're part of this study, and that they're following regulations. So we try to make sure that the investigator follows the regulations that concerns human subject protection, such as keeping records, that they are compliant with, say, for the research in the having enough people to do this research. It will also look at their past records. There's regulations regarding side effects that have to be reported, whether they be serious or non-serious, whether they've done the protocol of the research study the way it was presented. So auditing is a big part of the Human Subjects Protection Board, as well as now with everybody's probably very well identified with HIPAA and privacy concerns. And at the University of Louisville, our ethics, our IRB is also the privacy board. So we look at all those aspects, and it reaches out to various different arms of a study. And I don't know, Mike, if you were really wanting to know what we do if we find that something is not being done. The investigator is responsible for filing deviations in a protocol. And depending on the type of deviation, whether it's serious or continuing, and that whether continuing means it happens over and over again or something like that, then we would be involved in educating that researcher, that primary investigator, or maybe his whole staff, and we'll go in and talk to them about what could be done to meet these regulations, instruct them and educate them on the different regulations that they have missed, and try to improve it and make it better. Sometimes we'll ask that an investigator has some more continuing education just on what's involved in doing research so that all these regulations are met. So we try to protect the subject, we try to protect the researcher, and we try to protect the university.
All right, Laura, that's great. I think Jean's got a question she wants to follow up on.
Dr. Clark, have these increased regulations, have they been a good thing, or do they impede research? And how do you know which regulations are good and which ones are bad? And how can you deal with, sometimes we get so many regulations we can't get anything accomplished?
Oh, that's very true. And I guess, if you ask the investigator is probably going to say there's way too many regulations. If you ask somebody at the FDA and Health and Human Services, they're going to say, no, we need more regulations. So finding that happy ground, just like in any endeavor, when there's two ways of looking at things and even more, it can be difficult. But on the whole, I think the regulations are important. Without them, I'm afraid we might digress to where we were before. And there are times that we have to make an investigator realize that they're being a little overzealous. Sometimes, they're so focused on their research that it's this and this and this, that they've kind of skipped over involving what needs to be told to the subject. So that's where we come in and say, no, you have to explain this. Say this part of the study that you want to do, or this new sequence of events, or a new device that you're going to have them, or a questionnaire, or that type of thing. So we'll have to remind them, nope, you haven't told the subject that, and there'll be multiple revisions to informed consent during the study as the study itself evolves.
So I've been on the IRB for about 10 years. When Kelly McMasters, who's the chairman of the surgery department, suggested I might want to do this, I was thinking, what did I do to piss him off? Because there's a lot of Mark is getting nervous over there. We used some spicy language when we had Wayne Tuxen on here a while ago. But Laura, I think the IR in the 10 years I've been on has really done a good job sort of walking that fine line between accommodating all the regulations and trying to make the process as easy as possible for the investigators. And when you and Julie, Paula, and Dick Groff, when he was one of the chairs, you all really have done a good job of trying to walking that line. Most of the people listening, and probably most of the medical community, and even some of the faculty, don't really understand a lot of the issues that go on in the IRB. With all of these vaccine studies coming along, there's been a lot of discussion about phase 3 trials. Would you just take a few moments and go through the process of how whether it's a device or a drug, a monoclonal antibody goes through the phase 1, phase 2, and the phase 3 trial status, from being something as an idea that might be beneficial in some way to reaching a point where it becomes an accepted treatment by the FDA?
Sure. it'll only be about 3 hours for me to do that. But
Maybe you could try to figure out a way to do this so that we can get a few other questions in before the hour's over.
okay. I think the important thing for people to know is that it is a process, and it is it's a logical, progressive thing. So, it's you first say, oh, I think I might want to study this, and we'll talk about drugs since that's the most common thing right now. And some people forget that even before a study starts for a drug, there's a preclinical phase. Some people call it the phase 0. And then you have the phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. But the preclinical phase, it's before it can even start, it has to be tested as an experiment on animals to prove that the drug is safe and effective in animals. And they'll use anything from the term lab rat. They'll use mice. They'll use rabbits, especially for toxicity studies for pregnancy. They'll use even up to beagles, dogs, and even monkeys for all kinds of things, even for cosmetics that happens before this comes. And then they'll apply to the FDA, and they'll start a phase 1 study, and that's where it's tested on a few individuals, primarily for safety, but also at multiple doses. And one of the aims is to find the best dose with the fewest side effects. So this will be tested in a small group, maybe of 15 to 30 people. And there are centers that they'll do pharmacokinetic studies. How long does this last in the blood? They start giving a very low dose to the subject, and then higher doses are given until some side effects occur. And so they'll look and see what this is. And the drug may help patients, but the phase 1 trials are to test the drug's safety. And so if it's found to be safe enough, then it can be tested in a phase 2. And the phase 2 trial is not very large either. That's to further assess safety, as in all the aspects of a study as it works. But it's also to see if there is some efficacy there. Does it really work? Often new combinations or drugs are tested in a phase 2, and patients are closely watched to see how the drug works. And these may last for quite a bit of time. And it's rarely compared to the current standard of care in phase 2 studies. And that would occur in a phase 3. So once it goes through phase 2, then it goes to phase 3, where they compare this new drug to what's being used now for this disease that they're hoping to treat. And they're going to look at side effects, and this is where it gets much larger. It'll be hundreds or thousands of patients, and they're often in most of these are often multi-center, so they're not just done in one center. And sometimes it's done in Europe as well as other countries, so it can be international at this phase. Phase 3, sure, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, the phase 3, they're often randomized. And that's what's happened with these vaccine trials. They've fed through this, but they have not compromised safety. One of the ways to do that is to test more individuals, because this costs a lot of money. And this is probably one of the things that should be discussed, is that pharmaceutical companies put millions and millions of dollars into research and development, and very few, or I would say, it's not it's not economical for them to test this in large people all the time, because not that many of the drugs that they are looking at actually come to fruition and become a marketed drug. And so that's kind of one of the questions that people ask, why does this cost so much? Well, you have to think about what they've done and how many drugs have they gone through this process with that didn't work before they got to this one. And so there has to be some way that they recoup this cost. Of course, you can't gouge people, and I don't want to get into a cost discussion right now in the middle of these trials that I'm trying to explain to you. But you have to consider that this costs a lot of money to do, and so they do have to recoup some of this research and development. And just when a drug works really well, it just can't always be free. That's a big ethical whole. You could spend a whole nother hour on that topic. But at this phase 3, when they compare this, then they will also compare it to placebo, which is a non-entity drug. It's in the researcher in most of these drug trials, and the subject or patient, I'll refer to them as subject, because they're in a research study, they won't know whether they're taking the real drug or not. And so one of the things the IRB wants to know is, have they done a good job of informing people that they might not be in this study? And actually, there has been research studies to show that people, even though you tell them, will think that they're going to get the active drug. And even though you tell them that we don't know if this is going to help your condition or not, they all believe by signing up for this study, they're going to be helped, which may not always be the case. We hope that it is, and the researchers hope that it is. But one of the things we want to let people know that may not happen, and they need to know that that's a possibility. And what odds do they have of getting the actual test drug? So they're randomized to different groups, maybe different treatment arms, and they're looked to see how the outcome is, and is it better? And this may take years. So there can be more than 1 or 2 treatment groups in these trials, and there'll be one that maybe is the control group that gets the standard of care, and there'll be another group that gets for laymanization purposes, the placebo pill. And you can't choose which group you're going to be in. So that's the phase 3 trial. And then the phase 4 trial is when it goes into post-marketing, and they're still collecting data. And they'll go into this phase 4 trial when it is approved, but they want to still collect data. So they're going to, and this thing can be, tens of thousands of a lot of people that go into these trials. So that's just a very quick overview of the phases. Any questions on that?
You did that great in less than 3 hours, Laura. We're proud of you.
One of the questions I frequently get asked is this new vaccine going to be safe? And we've now got an expedited review of the new vaccines. We speeded up the process. From a patient standpoint, they say, are you going to take the vaccine? Because we don't know if it's safe or not. What would be your answer to that?
Well, I would say that what they've done with these studies is because they have enlarged. The more and more people that take a drug, the more and more things you're going to find out about it. When we first started having any kind of drug, we find out that by the time it gets to 2 million people, we're finding out more things about the drug. But with these vaccines, because of the way the vaccines are, and it's not a drug, it's a vaccine, there's not as much variability of what needs to be studied. for a vaccine. So a vaccine can be fast-tracked a little bit faster than a regular type of drug. And because these were given money from the United States, that they were given, I don't know, upwards of $2 billion. So they had plenty of money to go ahead with wide trials with more people than they would have done. So that's why they call it warp speed, but it in no way compromises safety. We're actually collecting more safety data than we would in the regular process that would take much longer. So there are things that can always happen with any type, and I would never say, and no informed consent would ever say that this is safe. There are risks with everything, but I certainly have no problems. I'm going to take this vaccine as soon as I can, and based on the investigations that they've done, I feel that these are very safe.
You mentioned the cost of drugs, and we as physicians also know how intense it is to place a drug on the market. But patients are ending up with big bills, and the United States is responsible for about half the bill for pharmaceuticals around the world. And there's a lot of talk about trying to control drug companies. Do you have any ideas about how we can get a handle on the cost of drugs in America?
Well, I will tell you that what Donald Trump, the President Donald Trump, has done, he's issued 2 rules aimed at lowering prescription drug prices, because the United States pays more for the same drug, as we know, than anywhere in the world. We're used to subsidize all these other places. And so lowering prescription drug prices, no one has really been able to accomplish that. But apparently what he did is going to be in effect in January. And these will, it's aimed, I think it targets Medicare, but right now, but what happens to Medicare trickles down to everybody else. And sorry about that.
Go ahead, Laura.
So what has happened is, people have gone to Mexico to get drugs for a period of time and come back, and they've gone to Canada. So I think one of the things that he's done, he has limited, he's allowed governors to negotiate and buy drugs, whereas before they could not. So they can buy from Canada. And what that does, it's the regular old competition type thing. He's also said that with this most favored nation, the one of the rules that he did was most favored nation, and that would require Medicare to tie the prices it pays for drugs to those paid by other countries. So it would limit what could be charged. And so that's going to be huge, especially for drugs like insulin and just things that have been just skyrocketing. And it's supposed to start in the beginning of January. It affects Medicare Part B drug costs, which is probably with IV drugs, injected drugs, oncology, and those type of drugs. So I think the intent is to cap the cost of those drugs at the lowest price that the drug manufacturers get from other countries. And so they're going to pay providers, I think, on a flat add-on amount for each dose instead of a percentage of each drug's cost. So it's supposed to be that a lot of these drugs are going to be a whole lot cheaper, and I think that's why the pharmaceutical companies don't like Trump, because he's been able to tell them that got to happen. It's probably one of the best things he's done in his presidency. And I'm hoping that when January rolls out, that's going to be huge, and it's going to trickle down to other things by having competitions. I don't know how these governors are going to purchase these drugs from these places, but I think it's going to be tremendous.
It would seem to
For the
me
public.
be a whole lot simpler if they simply dismantled the law that prevents Medicare from negotiating with the pharmaceutical industry, where every other of the 30 plus first world countries do that and get cheaper drug prices. The fact that Medicare cannot negotiate with the pharmaceutical industry is absolutely insane. Laura, let's kind of switch horses a little bit here and kind of get back to the sort of functioning of the IRB. So as an oversight board, let's say a research protocol comes through, and either in the protocol itself or in the informed consent, the risks of, let's say it's a new cancer drug, which has been used and it's been around for a while, it's been treated for other cancers, and it's now being applied to a different cancer. And that the risks of that drug, which has been around for a while, really aren't very well laid out in an informed consent, which is what tells the patients what's supposed to be going on. So what authority, what can the IRB do to make whoever's doing the study change their research section so that it is more reflective of the reality of what the side effects of that drug might be, and what authority, where does the authority come from that would allow them to do something like that?
Well, that came from that act that I told you about at the beginning, at the opening. That's it's mandated by Congress and the Health and Human Services that we have the oversight, the final say of the informed consent. We try not to be a dictator, and we try not to be a wordsmith, and we try not to be your third or fourth or fifth or 10th grade English teacher either. And no consent, if you had 10 people reviewing it, you'd have 10 different versions. And we try not to be overburden to the investigators, but we try to fulfill our mission of making sure that there's language that people can understand for side effects. So, rather than saying medical terms, we say lay terms. And so, but we also not undermine the relationship that the subject has with the investigator. It's the primary investigator's responsibility to make sure that the subject understands everything. So it's not to be an end-all document, even though it's morphed into 35 pages in a lot of studies. There are efforts continuing to try to simplify the document by not having so much into it and relying on the investigator a little bit more without cutting too many corners. And that's really difficult. But it's always the responsibility of the investigator to see if the subject has any questions after they've looked through the informed consent. So they look through it, they can even take it home and read it. They get a copy to take home with them. It'll contain what the procedure is of the study, what visits they have, the side effects, what are the alternatives. It's up to the investigator also to tell them. Sometimes they can get this drug by not being in this study, or there's other studies that they might get into. And so we tell them that that is a required part of the informed consent, and we make sure it's there, as well as a phone number that can be answered 24/7 if something happens, or if they need to get a hold of the investigator. So that's why it's so long, and that's why we send back edits to the primary investigator when we look at an informed consent. And what has happened with that is because some of this has felt to be too much wordsmithing and too much super editing. For cancer studies now, there is a central IRB, and it's not up to each individual area. There's a central IRB that goes through the informed consent, and each of the sites accepts that one consent. And so that's what has happened over just the past 5 years. That makes it a little maybe more simplified, but takes away the local flavor of the IRB in the region itself. So there is a happy medium, and we've lost a little bit and gained a little bit by having these central IRBs.
Let me change the subject here just a minute. It seems as though there, in the last year or two, there's been more political influence in institutions like the CDC, the NIH, and also the other institutions that control drugs. How significant do you think this is? And have you had any political influence at U of L?
You know, telling people that they can't go to work and shutting things down has been a tremendous problem with trying to keep people safe as well as not harming them. And that has become very political and has been really bad. And in some of the effects that it's had. In some places, it's been ruled unconstitutional. What right do we have to tell people everything to do? But no one has no one has experienced a virus like this one. And so to place blame on anyone about how they did or did not do this is pretty difficult in my mind, because we're writing it as we go, and sometimes we're wrong and sometimes we're right. And there was, for all the people that got up on TV and was saying this and this and this and this, they didn't know. They were saying what in the past history has been the best way to deal with this. And there's been nuances about this virus versus those that's not there. Now, you asked me about University of Louisville. We've had no political pressure. In fact, we are separate from even, in a sense, the university itself. If we disapprove something, a study or that type of thing, they really can't come to us and say approve it. We're separate, but we're also apart. And that's a good way to be, I think. And we've not experienced any political pressures in that.
Speaking of University of Louisville, I just learned a year or two ago that U of L is an R1 university, which means they're one of the top research universities in the country. Could you just briefly tell us about some of the great research projects we've had at U of L, particularly the Brown Cancer Center, and how that's affecting U of L and the state of Kentucky and the whole country?
Well, one that comes to mind, there's all kinds of things that they've done that they are not publicizing, I think, as well as they should, of some of the accomplishments that they have. I'm probably not the best person to to do that. But strides they've made in different types of treatment of melanoma, pancreatic cancer, the groundbreaking studies that are happening in spinal cord injury, trying to do and find out what they can for people to walk. Just this past week on TV, there's been a researcher on developing a new way to inject a drug. We're doing a lot of T-cell work, which we're going into the not the treatment kind of cancer treatments with drugs, but now getting your body to stimulate to fight the cancer itself. And that's the way that a lot of research is going now. And we've got many studies that are involving that, where we're developing T cells and injecting T cells. And these are your helper cells that will then fight the cancer itself. And we've been on the forefront of getting some of these newer drugs like Keytruda and the like that has been revolutionary in stopping solid tumors that has not happened before. So there's a whole lot going on here that's not known that probably U of L could do a much better job of publicizing that. But it's really exciting, and it's a very good cancer center to go to.
Laura, this morning I was brushing my teeth and I learned that in Britain, they had approved an emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine. And so the emergency use authorization is a term that's been floating around that I think a lot of folks don't understand. On my short time on the IRB, I've seen that come through for the odd drug in a special circumstance where a patient maybe didn't, was in kind of the last grasp at the brass ring, or somebody in cardiac failure would become might get a device that might or might not be helpful. So could you kind of describe the emergency use authorization process, how it works, what sort of situations aside from this vaccine where it might apply?
Sure. The emergency use is used if they think they've got enough data that it warrants a approval at a quicker timeline than they would normally do. Some of the emergency use is for drugs or devices that they could not go through the whole process because the disease is so rare that they couldn't go through the whole process, but they think it helps. And so they'll do an emergency use authorization. Say a doctor has a person with a real rare disease. There's a drug, but it's not really available, but it's there. And they work with the company and they'll do an emergency use authorization for that. It'll come to the IRB. There is still an informed consent. And so it'll come to the IRB and we'll approve the use of this drug in this person, given the right amount of information within 24 hours. So that's one of the things with these vaccines. It's kind of like an emergency use, but it's not a difficult one. Like for the Pfizer vaccine, they've got enough data, and I think it was they had like 160 something cases of COVID that occurred in their placebo arm, in the people that did not get the real vaccine, compared with only 8 in the other arm. And there were no serious safety concerns. So that's a huge difference. And so that in itself is enough to warrant almost an emergency use because they had I forget how many the total number was at that point, but that difference was so large that's one reason that they would grant an EUA for that.
So if you've got a situation where you have a request for emergency use authorization within 24 hours, the IRB only meets two, maybe 3 times a month. So who makes that choice or that decision to approve that authorization in a situation like that?
Well, we have me as the chair and we have 5 vice chairs. So there's someone always available to be able to do that every day. Now, we don't approve we're approving things that the FDA has already approved for emergency use.
No, I understand. So the entire, the whole board doesn't necessarily have to approve an emergency use authorization. That can be done by one of the chair or one of the vice chairs, depending upon the set of circumstances or the urgency of making that decision.
Correct. And then we'll present it to the board at the next meeting.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to have several other vaccines coming up next year. Will the IRB be involved in which vaccine is, which patients get which vaccine, or is that going to be made at the federal level? How will we make that decision?
Well, I think the CDC just met, and I think the CDC is making the decision about how the COVID vaccines are going to be administered as to who gets them first. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I think they just came out yesterday, as was publicized, that it would be healthcare workers first. And when they talk about healthcare workers, they don't just mean doctors. They are going all the way through from doctors to nurses to ward clerks to pharmacy to laboratory and even the custodial people, because it takes all those people to run this hospital. And without them, especially the custodial people, we couldn't run it. There's so much that you have to dispose of properly, and we're using so much protective equipment and all that. So they are saying that it's everyone in hospitals is deemed a healthcare worker. And then they said they would go to the long-term care facility. And then the third tier would be those that are, I didn't catch the age, whether it was 65 and older or maybe 70 and older would be the next group. So they're taking the people most at risk, and I'm sure in there they're going to at some point say people with immune dysfunctions are going to be in that high risk group, along with the upper age group.
Laura, so before I ask you the next question, Mark is waving his hand at me. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we're getting toward the end of the lollipop. One of the things I've noticed on my relatively short time in the IRB is that over the years, it seems to me, this may be not correct, that's why I'm asking the question, that the number of protocols that are submitted by independent study groups like the Children's Oncology Group or the Southwest Oncology Group or the Radiation Therapy Oncology Group seem to be less, and there seem to be more protocols submitted by industry sponsors. And I guess my question is that been your observation from having been on the board longer and reviewing these things in a more detailed way than I have as a board member?
I think that's accurate, Mike. If you're asking me why I think this is, I think it's probably because the cost that it takes to do research. There would be more people at all universities doing research if they had the time and if they had the structure. You need research coordinators. You're treating patients as well as trying to do research in clinical research, in the clinical research arena. So there's researchers that what we say do bench research, and those are one entity. The entity that we're talking about today are clinical research people. These are people that are still practicing medicine, almost all of them, as well as doing studies. So a lot of our oncologists, a lot of their treatment is various studies that they're participating in and following this protocol. That's very expensive, and it's also very time consuming. And it takes you away from other aspects where you would be generating revenue. And so I think with the increasing cost of healthcare in general, there's also increasing cost of research, and there's more pressure that you just don't have the luxury of time and monies to do research like it was before we escalated health costs so much.
Well, I also think there's been a decrease in the funding on a federal level because there used to be a lot more opportunity to get funding to do various research projects 10 years ago than there are today.
Yes, you're right.
Is that because the federal government's not funding the NIH like they used to?
Well, the NIH is a super entity, and they have done tremendous work and made tremendous strides for health. They could stand more funding, but they also have a hierarchy in and of themselves. And it's very difficult to break into the ceiling of the NIH. And I think there's a double-edged sword there. Yes, they need more money, but they don't need to be the only entity. I know so many researchers that say, well, there's no way I can get funding from the NIH because I haven't gotten my class 5 grant, so to speak, or whatever. And they tend to kind of fund the same people. And there needs to be more, I think, in my mind, than just the NIH.
Laura, we're into the last minute here. I want to thank you. We want to thank you for your willingness to spend the time with us. This has been a really good discussion, and the timing of it couldn't have been better with all of the business going on with the pandemic and the vaccines and the other things that are going on. So thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
This has been very informative.
Okay, Dr. Clark, again, thanks so much. Kentuckians for Single Payer Healthcare is still meeting virtually. You can reach out to Kay Tillow, our chairperson, to request an invitation to those Zoom meetings. Kay's email address is nursenpo@aol.com. That's nursenpo@aol.com. For more information about the group, you can go to kyhealthcare.org, kyhealthcare.org. You can follow the group on Facebook. Dr. Shavli shares with us that we now have a Twitter account. And I just really appreciate getting through another episode without the hair dye running down on the equipment here in the Hayburn building. And would also encourage folks to go to forwardradio.org forwardradio.org to learn more about this volunteer-driven radio station and to participate or to contribute to keeping this program going. So thanks again, guys.
You're welcome. We're done.